Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. I'm Victoria Cox, host of this meeting, but panel member Vince Caliza will be the chair today. Just a couple of quick notes. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and the media observing this meeting. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking, and I ask panel members to mute and unmute themselves when it's their time to speak. Okay, thanks, Vince. Can you please begin the meeting?
Good afternoon, Victoria. Can you please confirm this session is being recorded?
It is being recorded.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to all to the virtual design review panel. Any changes to the agenda today, Victoria?
No.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest within the panel? Great. So the only item on the agenda today is a mixed-use development located at 80 John Street North. The lead planner in the file is Mark Keller. Good afternoon, Mark. Assume you're there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes. Thanks.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, you're good, Mark.
And you're seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. My name is Mark Kaler. I'm a planner on the urban team, and we're here to review 80 John Street North, which is a pre-application and a future site plan control application. So the development concept is for a mixed-use development consisting of two 30-story towers above a 9-story base building with 619 dwelling units, just over 1,700 square meters of commercial space and 272 parking spaces. The site is located between John and Catherine and Street to the south and Wilson Street to the north. The entire site's occupied by a surface parking lot. You can see another surface parking lot on the other side of John Street. To the south is a medical clinic. We'll note there's a development approved through a rezoning for a 30-story tower on a portion of that site, kind of the southeast corner. And then to the east, there's the new police investigative services building, some lower scale buildings to the north, and then further to the south, you'll note this aerial, it hasn't been updated. There's a new John Rebecca Park in that location. So here's a view of the site from John Street looking southeast.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering if there's any way of making the images larger on your presentation screen. They're quite small.
I have it full screen. Do you have any ideas?
Mine's full screen and showing up. It's big for me.
Okay. Sorry.
You might have to change your WebEx view.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, so here's again a view of the site from John Street, just right at the intersection of John and Wilson, looking southeast. It's, as I mentioned, a service parking lot. Here's a view from Wilson Street, looking southwest. And here's a view of the site from Catherine Street North. You can see there's three, I can see in the previous slide too, there's three 2.5 story buildings just kind of at the corner of Catherine and Wilson. And here's a view to the south. You can see the 71 Rebecca Street, the existing medical clinic, and then you can see the new John Rebecca Park just behind it. And a view to the west, another large surface parking lot, and you can kind of see the larger buildings of Jackson Square and along James Street, Gore Park area further to the southwest. Here's to the east, the new Police Investigative Services building, 2 stories. And then to the north, it's lower scale, two-story residential buildings. And then over to the northwest, there's another service parking lot. You may remember 41 Wilson Street. It was another application that came to DRP earlier in the year for 3 30-story towers. That's also a site plan application. So just a quick overview of what's being proposed. Again, 2 30-story buildings on top of a 9-story podium. Smaller podium towards the rear with vehicle access to the parking. And just a couple of elevations, you can see the 2 30-story towers, the 9-story podium, then the shorter podium over towards Catherine Street. So in terms of the policy environment in the UHOP on Schedule E, it's in the downtown urban growth center, and on Schedule E1 in the downtown mixed use area. So the urban growth center is the city's preeminent node. It's planned for a range of uses, commercial, institutional, but also functions as a residential neighborhood. And the downtown mixed use area again serves as the central focus of the city, creates a sense of place, provides for higher density housing and a range of business, retail, service uses within the entire downtown mixed use area. In terms of urban design policies, new development should respect the character, development patterns, and built forms in landscapes, should promote quality design that's consistent with the surrounding environment, contributes to the character and ambience of the community through the design of streetscapes and amenity areas, masses development to respect existing and planned street proportions, designs new development to minimize impact on neighboring buildings and public spaces by providing, among other things, appropriate transitions in scale, and creates a comfortable pedestrian environment. The site is, of course, within the Downtown Hamilton Secondary Plan, and it's designated downtown mixed use. On the heights, building heights map downtown, it is a high-rise 2 designated property. So the downtown mixed-use designation, it's intended to support intensive urban-scale mixed-use development, specific policies for tall buildings in the secondary plan. No building should exceed the height of the top of the escarpment, and building bays should be designed to fit harmoniously with the adjacent street wall and mitigate sun and shadow impacts. Adequate separation should be provided between towers on site and on adjacent properties to preserve sun access, sky views, limit wind conditions, and provide for appropriate transition. And tall buildings should be evaluated using the Downtown Hamilton Tall Building Guidelines, which I will speak about a little bit later. Urban design policies in the secondary plan. There should be a transition in scale through a variety of design methods, including angular planes, location orientation of buildings, and step backs and setbacks. One criteria is development should allow a minimum 3 hours of sun coverage between 10 and 4 as measured on March 21st and September 21st on public sidewalks and other amenity areas. Tower tops of tall buildings should be designed so they are a recognizable landmark that contributes to the skyline, and significant views of the Niagara Escarpment should be maintained. In this case, John Street North and Catherine Street North are both identified as view corridors to the Niagara Escarpment. For the zoning bylaw, the property is zone D1, which is the downtown central business district zone. I'll just highlight a few of the regulations. First is building height. There's a maximum height of 89 meters. There's also maximum building base facade heights specific to each frontage. So along John Street North, that number is 22 meters. It's 22 meters again on Wilson Street, and then 16 meters on Catherine Street North. There's a 3-meter required setback above the building base facade height. So above 22 meters, you'd be required a 3-meter step back for the remainder of the building. And then there's a minimum 12.5 meter step back for the tower portion of the building, anything exceeding 44 meters from a side or rear lot line. And then interior to the site, 25 meters between 2 towers. So 2 buildings that exceed 44 meters on the same property. And then there's a minimum 60% ground floor facade and 25 to 40% of the second and third stories shall be glazing. Now I'll highlight a few things from the tall buildings guidelines. There's a maximum recommended floor plate size of 750 square meters for towers, and larger flare plates may only be permitted where other guidelines are met. And no building face along a public street should be longer than 70 meters without a physical break. Buildings over 40 meters could use other techniques to break up the perceived mass, such as articulation or changes in materials. In addition, this particular site is located within the John Rebecca area and King William area in the guidelines. So you can see the site just here north of John Rebecca Park. So new developments in this area are intended to be oriented to the streets with minimal setbacks and to provide parking facilities interior or below grade. The street wall height of new buildings should be low to mid-rise to support a pedestrian scale, and particular attention to detail should be given to avoiding blank walls along building facades. So this is really recognized as an area that does contain service parking lots that could be redeveloped to provide a pedestrian-oriented area in proximity to the park, and also King William, which is a pedestrian-oriented area. And that brings me to the questions for discussion. The first is, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Secondly, does the proposal encourage a harmonious and compatible approach to infilling by minimizing the impacts of shadowing and maximizing light to adjacent properties in the public realm? And finally, does the proposal contribute to the character and ambience of the community through appropriate design of streetscapes and amenity areas? And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions now or later, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mark. We're now ready for the applicant to present the proposal. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
You're muted, sorry.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, hi. My name is Gabriel Diano. I'm a senior project architect with McCallum Sather and the project manager on this project. I'm here in the boardroom with Ashraf Mazin, our lead designer on the file, and that's why we're wearing masks today. And we will be presenting for the 80 John Street North project. Next slide. So I'm sure that you have all read the design review panel submission. Just some of the highlights. Our site area is 5,600 square meters. Our estimated overall building GFA is 58,000 square meters. We're estimating about residential GFA of 43,000 square meters, and we have an approximate unit count of just over 600 with a retail GFA of 1,700 square meters and an estimated parking, only assuming for above grade parking at the moment, 272 parking spots. And we'll start the presentation by discussing some of the contextual plans. And we'll apologize in advance, it's a heavy PDF, so it kind of takes a few seconds to skip across. You want to click on the slideshow and then see if it'll, yeah, now press enter. So our first contextual map is of the zoning context. Can you go back a slide there? There we go. And what we've done is the 5 and 10 meter walk around, and the zoning that we're seeing right here is the current zoning and the current uses of the site. So we're in a business district area with residential above us, and then the main downtown core is in pink.
Sorry to interrupt. We're actually not, I'm not seeing at least the correct plan up on my screen. I'm not sure
Oh,
if everyone else is.
yeah, no.
It's still on the design brief for me.
That's weird. We're having some technical difficulties over here.
I'll stop sharing and reshare.
Yeah, if you could also go to full screen view, that would be appreciated as well, just so it's a bit bigger.
Absolutely. I'm seeing the right thing now.
Okay.
Go back one. Okay. Go full screen. Let's just see if it sticks. No, because you're sharing the program. That's the problem.
Okay.
Why don't you close just the sidebars there, and we'll stick to this. Sorry about that.
That's the maximum.
That's the maximum. Shoot. Okay. Is that better?
I'm sorry, is that a PDF?
Yeah, it's a PDF.
Can you go to view and just scroll down? There's a command there that says full screen mode. Maybe that will help remove the commands
When
at
we
the
go
top.
to full screen, it stops sharing.
Can you share the screen rather than the program, Ashraf?
I don't want to use it too much time. If you can do it, that's great. Otherwise, we'll just move on.
Okay, now go back to it. Now go full screen. There we go. Oh,
No, it is just a zoom in.
go view. Yep, far right. Far right. Presentation. Okay, that's working better. Okay, so as I was saying, we've shown the 5 and 10-minute walk from our site, and the coloring here is of the current uses from the current uses of the site around us. So we're in the field of a business district. Of course, our site is currently parking, and just above us is some residential areas, and we could see the downtown core. Next slide. The neighborhood context, we just want to identify some key points of interest, like I like to call it, Cops Coliseum. We have John Robinson Park below us, the GO train stations, Jackson Square, and the Hamilton General Hospital all around us. The next few photos are contextual site photos that I won't spend too much time on given time constraints. And the bottom left photo there is of John Robinson Park, and the top left photo is of a 3-story commercial just across from us on Wilson Street, just north of us. On the left side is a survey of our current site highlighted in pink. We have the majority of the block in the northeast corner is a property with 3 separate properties that we do not own, and south of us is the 71 Rebecca Street address where there was a DRP submission that happened, I believe, back in October on that property. The top right represents from the City of Hamilton zoning the maximum building height we're allowed if the holding provisions are removed of 97 meters. It's worth noting on the block just north of us, if there was a developer that did a land assembly, that property would be 98 meters with the holding provisions removed. And the bottom right is our facade heights that Mark talked about. Next slide. So the map on the left is from the downtown Hamilton secondary plan, and it shows that we're in the high-rise 2 area as envisioned in the downtown Hamilton secondary plan. Our site is the site in fuchsia in the field of purple, and on the map on the right is the land use, and we're downtown mixed use. Next slide. So I'll pass it on to Ashraf here.
Okay. So after reviewing the zoning and neighborhood context, the site context, looking at the secondary plan, the allowable height and land use, looking at the setbacks from the property lines, development to the south, and the houses to the northeast corner, and the distances between the towers. We studied a number of layouts for the site plan to see how 2 towers could fit in efficiently, properly having presence on the main streets and allowing for proper amenity areas and distances between the towers. That has been narrowed down to the 3 site plan diagrams that we have in front of us, and the preferred option was the one to the right, where it allowed for proper distances between the towers, setbacks from the northeast corner, and setback from the south tower. That's why you can see that the our south tower is smaller in footprint than the north tower to respect the minimum distance from what could be built to the south. After that, we looked at the massing, the height articulations. So the diagram to the far left is what could be built as of right. And we came up with a few options to study how that could be articulated, how the massing could be broken down to fit within the context and respond to the street scale. Then that's a 3D diagram of how the development is programmed. So at the lower floor, you can see the entrances to the residential towers in red, some services linked to that in purple, and the pink is the commercial component at that level. And then there is a partial car parking at this level that leads to the above ground car parking, and that's shown in gray. Then the rest of the lower podium is wrapped in residential residential units, and the inner side and the back side of it is the car parking, and that goes up for 3 floors. Above that, we have the recessed floor where we have some residential units and amenities and access to green roof on top of the podium, and then continues some residential units taking that U shape, and on top of that sits the 2 towers up to the 30th floor. And then that's the site plan, the proposed site plan showing the lower podium, the upper podium, and the 2 towers. The tower to the north on the Wilson Zone corner is, as I said before, is slightly larger than the one to the south. Then we didn't have a PDF or drawings for the development to the south, so we only had access to the YouTube of the DRP meeting. From there, we sort of traced the outlines of the proposed tower to the south, where we can see it has no setback, or it's at 0 setback from our property corner. However, we are showing the setback that we assume could work for us. Then that's a diagram of how the first floor works. Again, the area in pink is the retail access from Wilson Street, with a sort of patio between our development and the existing houses at the northeast corner. In light blue, the entrances to the residential lobbies, and in yellow, some services, and the access to the car parking from Catherine Street. These are schematic 3D diagrams of how the development looks like from 4 different corners. in relation to the proposed tower to the south. That's a view of the development from on Wilson Street looking east. There you can see how the mapping has been further detailed to show the articulation between the lower podium, upper podium, and the towers, how the towers were kept simple with a combination of inset balconies forming a characterized pattern, and how that pattern moved down to the residential uses on the lower podium. We also looked at the application of material there that would emphasize that articulation and link the development to the context and to the neighborhood. So we looked at a number of options for the lower podium. Now we are proposing weathering steel there that sort of links the color to the color family of the brick used for the residential houses in the neighborhood. And then as we go up, we go simpler with a combination of glass and metal panels, and then a recall of the same color that's used in the podium, in the balconies to link the project visually. That's another view on Wilson Street looking west. There you can see the houses on the northeast corner, the entrance to the car parking podium, and how the car parking facade has been created with a architectural screen, combination of architectural screen and metal panels. And up there you can see the proposed balconies that provide that view from the towers to the lake and to the escarpment. That's how the development looks like with the proposed tower to the south. We haven't modeled their podium, we've just modeled the outlines of the tower. That's a closer view towards the corner where we can see the residential entrance, the retail facade, and the lower residential suite, the recessed floor, and the upper podium, and how the facade on Wilson and John Street are animated with the retail and with the residential. That's a contextual elevation of the development, showing how we scaled down the lower podium to the houses and the context in the neighborhood, then the upper podium and the towers. That's the development facade from John Street. And from Catherine Street, where we can see the car parking entrance. And from Wilson Street, where we have the retail facade. And that's from Rebecca Street. The shade in gray is the proposed development to the south. And that's a schematic section that shows how the development is programmed and the vertical relation between the different components.
And as part of our DRP submission, we did a sun shadow study. We looked at both the spring and fall equinox, and our conclusions from it was that the public sidewalk along the south side of Wilson would be in full shade, but on the north side, it met the criteria for a minimum of 3 hours of sun between 10 and 4 p.m. The 50% sun coverage criteria is met for public plazas, parks, and open spaces affected by our building shadows. John Robinson Park is south of us, so it's not affected. And our shadowing does not impact any public space listed that were required to be not shadowed. And our proposed massing is the result of us looking at, as Ashraf had presented, the different options and locations that we could put the towers, and we felt this was provided the most optimal impact. And that is it. Questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, we'll provide an opportunity for each panel member to seek clarification and ask for further clarification. So maybe we'll start with Tim.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you for the presentations. A couple of questions, I think, for Mark. I just want to confirm, so the city's understanding is, or interpretation of this development is that the base of the building is 9 stories, correct? Because it could be read in different ways, but it was described as the 9-story podium. I just wanted to confirm that that would, under the city's tall building guidelines, that would be considered the height of the base of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I was just describing it as, I guess we would consider wherever that first step back is to be the base of the building.
Which is the issue we'll get to later, which is there's no step back. There's no step back. So that's fine. That's good enough, Mark.
Okay.
The area to the north of Wilson, it's designated high rise in the secondary plan. With the new downtown zoning, does it also have an 89-meter height limit on that block?
I did notice while the applicant was presenting that there was a typo in my presentation. The height for this site is 97, and the height for the block, yeah, the height for the block to the north is 98.
98. Okay. Sorry, one more question for you, I think, Mark, or maybe other city staff. What's the right-of-way width of Wilson?
It's 3 meters.
30 meters?
3. 3.
Are you talking about the right-of-way dedication? I can look that up for you. Maybe you could ask another question, and I'll get that for you while you're talking.
Yeah, it's not the dedication. It's just the full right-of-way width of Wilson, or the plan.
Yeah, I'll find that for you now. I'll just take me a couple minutes. So maybe you could.
Thank you, Mark. And I get one question, I guess, for Ashraf or Gabriel is, did you consider going with a square floor plate on the towers? And maybe, obviously doing that would require different locations and orientation for the towers, but is that something you explored, or were you just set on the more linear, the 20 by whatever it is, 35, 38 meter length of the towers? Would you look at a square floor plate option, or was that just ruled out for reasons of cost or other reasons?
Actually, that was one of the options that we've studied. We just chose not to present it here, but to work out two efficient floor plates, we wouldn't achieve the minimal distance between the towers. We have tested that. We have tested a number of applications for 2 point towers or square floor plates. We've also tested 1 linear and 1 square. None of these actually worked towards an efficient floor plate and the minimal distance between the towers as well. That's why we have chosen only to show the options that we have shown in this presentation.
Okay, and the main reason you went with the tower locations and orientation that you prefer is because of the increased separation distance that you can achieve, the 25 meters. Is that the driver behind that decision?
Yeah, that's correct. Plus the setbacks from the unit at the northeast corner, and the setback from the south development as well.
It gave us the greatest setbacks that we were most conformed by locating our 2 towers along John Street. So that provided us a diagonal distance from the proposed 71 Rebecca. If they were to build their tower further south of 25 meters, it gave us from our 2 towers, between our 2 towers, 25 meters. And we're meeting the setbacks required to the northeast property of those houses there.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Tim, I can give you the right-of-way width. It's 26.21 on Wilson. That's the ultimate in the U-Hop. So with the 3-meter widening, the likely current right-of-way width is approximately 20 meters. So
Okay,
currently
the plan is
20,
to go to
ultimate
26.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Tim. Could I ask Gabriel if you can put the site plan on the screen? And then we'll go to Jackie for some questions.
Absolutely.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Vince.
Okay, James?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation. You already answered my one question. I guess that was a slip of the tongue. So the permitted height is 97 meters. I guess I'm just curious as to why the building is not providing any step backs. There's zoning requirements and tall building guidelines requirements that are pretty strong with regards to street wall issues and balancing between podium heights and tower heights, mitigation through step back. So is there a reason that the project's not able to achieve a step back?
Okay, so the secondary plan calls for a minimum height at Wilson and John Street of 22 meters, and that's what we have to use, and to extend a couple of floors above to achieve a more efficient residential floor plate. And we chose to treat that by separating the podium, or articulating it into two levels of podium: the lower podium, which is 4 floors, and then a recessed floor, and the upper podium, which is another 4 floors. And we've also considered the setback at the northeast corner, where there is a transition from the high-rise, mid-rise to the existing two houses.
I guess my question is more specific to John Street. I mean, John Street is probably the of your three frontages, John Street probably is the primacy for a pedestrian environment, and you're essentially going straight up 30 stories without any stepping.
We combine between the high rise going up to the 30th floor and the stepping. So if you see the piece in the middle there, we step from the lower podium to the upper podium, and both are framed with the high rise. We chose to give the tower presence on the main corner, the John and Wilson Street.
Okay. I guess a new thing. There was a slide that showed the evolution of the design, and there were some design options. So, so the middle of the top shows 3 site plans. Drawing on the left, well, basically staggered. Can you just explain how did you get from going from staggered to 2 buildings essentially matching each other on the John Street frontage?
The problem with the middle site plan where you're seeing them staggered is that we weren't hitting the tall building design guidelines of 25 meters in between, and we were very, very close to the 3 houses or 2 houses in the northeast corner of the property, which made that very overbearing. So we thought that the far site plan on the right was the most optimal siting of the 2 towers to provide a good separation and stepping back from the 3-story houses in the northeast corner, and then give the presence to John Street, which is, like you said, a very major street.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Those are all my questions.
Thanks, James. You're going to go to Utah?
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Gabriel, for the presentation. Just one quick question. Is there a strategy or future intent to study underground parking? How you arrive to the solution of just above ground?
Yes, there is. There's a huge appetite to look at what we're going to do underground, but we need to do the requisite studies, geotechnical, environmental, to determine where our water table is, how contaminated the site is, if it is contaminated, and then determine the cost and see how far we can go down. So that is another step for us, and we will be looking at that with the ownership group to determine if it's feasible, both construction and financially, and we hope to have some answers when we submit the next round.
Perfect. And my second question will be related to retail. Do you have at least a preliminary idea of who you think your tenants might be oriented to Wilson and the local street?
No, we don't have an idea of who the potential retail could be in there. We haven't gone out to market to see what the interest and appetite is. We've just allocated space on the ground floor, but we're excited to do that market demand analysis and see who would be interested in moving into this tower.
Okay, well, thank you, Gabriel. That's it for me, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you. Mario?
Just a couple of quick questions. Thanks for the presentation. The parking structure, am I reading it correctly on the plan that it comes right out to Catherine Street? There's some renderings that show glazing across the first floor. Is there something intended there, or is that the glazing right into the parking garage?
Can you do that render of Catherine? The parking garage does project towards Catherine Street. We've created an architectural screen of glass and metal to encapsulate that. That is glass and weathering steel or Coritan steel. Again, on the ground floor, we haven't really determined if there could be commercial tenants out in there, but that's always a possibility, depending on if we can make it efficient for the ramping and the parking there. And we thought that this screen was a very pleasant screen, a very architecturally interesting one, and it's facing, of course, that police station. That's 2 stories. This in relation is 4 stories, which I think is a nice setting down to the police station. And of course, in the next render we have we'll have a 0 meter setback to the adjacent 71 Rebecca.
Okay. And what's the intended use of the 9 meter sort of landscape area between the back of the building or the side of the building and the residential houses that are there? Is that meant to serve retail, or like could be patio space or something? Is that the intention?
It could be for the retail, could be for the residential. We want to respect those residential homes that are only 3 stories in height, so we thought a nice little landscape buffer would help that, given the size of our development. So it was just a nod to what's in the northeast corner of the site.
Okay. And my last question is about the setback on Wilson Street. Does the building step back out over above? It was hard to, on the plan, it looks like there's some notes about the retail. So does the building step back towards the right of way above the first floor, or am I reading that wrong?
Sure, I understand. So we always respect the right of way on Wilson and John Street, but the building above, it does project a bit, but it is still respecting the right of way.
Okay. Fair enough. That's it for me, Vince.
Thanks, Mario. Yasin, please.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Did you pursue an option where, let's say you added another floor of parking, but reduce the actual lateral width of the length of the parking to allow for more housing at the back, let's say? So similarly in your diagram on page 13, which is, sorry, not 13, sorry, the massing diagram that you have. on page 14. You show this residential that wraps around on the upper three levels of the podium. It wraps around the parking. You try an option where it wrapped all the way around, so you had residential frontage on the back?
But by the back, you mean Catherine Street? Catherine Street.
Yes.
Actually, yeah. First, the edge of the development to the south is at a zero setback from the south development and the property line. So I think the best use there is the car parking. And to provide some more residential on Catherine Street, it would necessitate another set of staircases and elevators as well, which might affect the efficiency of the car parking and the entrances to the car parking.
Another thing to note is that the 71 Rebecca Street, sorry, my computer just shut off. The 71 Rebecca Street development also has their access to their garage from Catherine Street. So if we put residential there, it's actually a very busy street. I believe the police station also has their driveway on Catherine Street as well. So I think that it wouldn't make sense to put more residential on that busy street.
Yeah, my question is really, I guess it'll come out in the comments, really what I'm referring to. But it feels like you had a chance of having double frontage on the lot, but you chose to create a front and a back because of the parking requirements. So that's just my question. It's more from an urban design strategy, how you propose that. Can I just ask, are you or have you had any contact with the developer or the architects for 71 Rebecca? And are you in consultation with them in any way? Like, are you discussing anything?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
If you like. I represent the ownership group Canif Properties. We have been contacted recently by the new owners of 71 Rebecca to advise us that they have conditionally purchased the property. This was after they had their design review panel meeting, but they have not, as of yet, shared their plans with us or anything else.
Okay. So just another question. Did you, in terms of the massing of the towers, did you try an option where you had varying heights rather than two distinct towers of the same height?
Well, what we propose to do here is actually our north tower is a bigger floor plate than our south tower. We are looking right now at the overall heights of these, but right now we've proposed them as of right withholding provisions removed at the 97 meters.
Right, but it's you didn't test an option where the heights were different. It's the actual plan dimension that's different, right?
Yeah, it's right now what we've proposed, our plan dimensions different versus testing out different heights of the building.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you, Yasin and Robert. Any comments?
Yeah, thanks. Two quick questions. One has to do again with those two houses on I guess it's three properties, two houses in the northeast corner. Question from Mark. What is the protection or the attitude toward those houses? Are they given protection as if they are part of a sort of a residential neighborhood, or are they considered part of this clearly changing area that now is permitting very tall buildings? But are there other precedents in the city where how properties like that are treated as the large developments come up around them?
Well, the UHOP does have policies about transitioning to existing development. So it's within the block that's zoned for a high rise, and it's designated that way in the UHOP. But there are still policies that speak to transition to existing buildings, not just future development. If that's what you're getting at.
Yeah. So, but I guess my question is: are there other precedents within Hamilton where, if it was a different zoning category, for example, if it was a resident, low-rise residential zoning designation on the corner, that would be one thing and one sort of way of relating or transitioning to those buildings. But my understanding here is that those 3 lots are also part of this zoning area, which permits tall buildings, correct? So that perhaps the relationship, the way the new development will relate to that is also about what the future may hold for a site like that.
Yeah, I think we'd have to consider how that may redevelop. But again, just to say that the secondary plan speaks not only to future use of properties, but also existing. So the intent of the policies is to ensure transition not only to what will be there in the future, but also potentially what's there now.
Thanks. Second question, if we just go quickly back to the massing option diagram that was shown earlier, there's a small sketch there that's labeled as of right on the left. And I just want to get a sense from either the city or the architect. So that, for example, one thing that's been noted, and I can't tell on this size thumbnail sketch, there is a required step back of the tower along any street frontage, which appears to be maybe shown on that little as of right thumbnail, but maybe not reflected. And so if somebody could just comment on that, is that in fact an accurate as of right sketch? And how do the kind of proposed sketches differ from that as of right permission?
Was that to the question to the city or to the architects?
Well, I guess to the accuracy of the sketch, to the question to Mark, and then how the proposal differs is a question for the architect.
The accuracy of the sketch. Sorry, Robert, can you repeat that part?
So in other words, it's labeled as of right, but I would just like to get a sense, if you've turned your mind to it, is that an accurate representation of what is actually permitted as of right on the site?
That one massing model in the far left corner?
Yes.
I don't. Yeah, you'd have to ask the architect what they're referring to. I mentioned some of the zoning regulations in terms of step backs above the building base, facade height. I don't see that on that drawing.
Mark, maybe I can step in here. It's Shannon Mackay, Senior Project Manager. So with regards to as of right, it's not reflective of what as of right is, because anything above 44 meters requires a holding provision to be removed. And through that holding provision removal, we're asking for the demonstration that it meets the policies with regards to sun shadow impact, visual impact assessment, wind impact, functional servicing, and transportation impacts. So really, as of right is actually 12 stories, 44 meters, with those setbacks required for the building base facade reflective of the right-of-ways of the surrounding street, and then above 6 stories as well, internal lot line. So as of right isn't the height that's shown on the schedule related to the zoning bylaw because of that holding provision removal requirement.
It seems to me it's also not showing. Sorry, it's also not showing the as of right step backs and even sort of base building heights. Anyways, some of this will come out in comments. I don't think we should dwell any further on this. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Vince, you're on mute.
Oh, can we answer Robert's question?
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, did you consider purchasing the two houses on the corner?
Yes, we know that the ownership group has looked at that, and one property is owned by the city of Hamilton, and the other two are owned by some private groups or private individuals. But as far as we know, the architects, we don't think anything has closed.
Well, it kind of would make a lot of sense to do that, wouldn't it?
We agree.
I mean, you can integrate a full block rather than have this appendage sitting there without any kind of cohesiveness to the overall development in the future, because whether it's got high-rise zoning potential or otherwise, it's a pretty small block to do anything like that on it with setbacks. And it would seem that you could then rethink your plan, particularly in the context of option 2 on your, or even option 1 in your original studies, and potentially integrate a better parking structure than the one you have at the moment, because you're significantly deficient on parking. I know that's a risk the CNF would want to take or not want to take, but in any event, it would be, I think, advantageous. I'm making a comment rather than a question again, but anyway, it would be advantageous to integrate that corner and complete the development, particularly from an urban design perspective, that corner would be part of the development, and I think add a big benefit to the overall form and scale and massing, and give potential then for building separations as well. Is there a reason you chose to lower the parking ratio below the bylaw?
At the moment, we've just determined how much we can fit above grade. We haven't done the requisite geotechnical and environmental studies of the ground to determine the constructability and the financials to go below grade. So we just haven't had the chance to do the requisite studies to determine how much lower we can go underground to fit more parking. So this is what we can fit above grade currently.
So the way the environmental regulations, if you place commercial on ground floor and parking on ground floor, you can build without cleaning the site?
Sorry.
Is that what's driving? Is that sort of what's driving your, part of what's driving your solution?
Right now, we're assuming that we're going to have a high water table and contaminated soil. So we have to determine first the financial feasibility of going underground based on the constructability and doing the correct disposal of that contaminated site if it is contaminated. So that all has to be determined.
So you haven't done a phase 1 on this yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Vincent, I can chime in regarding the ownership issue if you'd like.
Sure.
The hard corner, which is owned by the city of Hamilton, has been, as part of our discussions with the city, we approached them a couple of years ago to discuss selling us that parcel simply because it was deemed excess land surplus. And so, or at least it's supposed to be deemed surplus. So we have been following up with the city, but our understanding is that that should be able to be sold to us. We're happy to transact with the city on that parcel. Regarding the other two, subsequent to Sonoma purchasing their parcel before they sold it to the current owner, they own 71 Rebecca. They ended up purchasing 87 Catherine, I believe it is, the southern house. And that was a little bit of a negotiating strategy for them. So we tried to come to terms with them on that parcel, but unfortunately we couldn't. As it relates to the house in between, so the middle parcel, there is a gentleman who owns that property. He's a broker, and we've been in very good standing with him. We have a good relationship with him. He manages a special type of use there. It's a residence that has a particular use, and so it's difficult for him to relocate his residence without a long lead time. So I think that there could be an opportunity to transact with him, but we've been advised that it doesn't make sense unless we're able to purchase all three in terms of the site plan and the configuration of the layout.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because you could integrate him into the base of your retail, you know, from a phase perspective, you know.
Yeah, our preference was to purchase all three. We've been working on this for a little while, but sometimes, as you know, in life, it's not possible to transact. So.
I know the story. Okay, I just wondered because it's a bit of an obvious, because it then, you know, with that corner, it allows you to do a whole pile of different things, and one of them being, you know, the step backs and the setbacks, and you know, try and respect the tall building guidelines and some of the relationship to the street, particularly when they do a road widening and so on. You know, things get pretty tight after a while, and you work really diligently. It's quite clear to, you know, maximize the units and try and get the parking to work in a reasonable and somewhat inexpensive way. I recognize the length of the garage, the ramps, all that stuff to make it work, but it's really unfortunate you can't get more of that corner at least, and try and integrate it, and then you could rethink your parking a little bit, and maybe even internalize it a little bit more, so that you can, you know, I know the retail component today is a bit of a questionable thing, so it just certainly opens up the door for more, another way of looking at it. Anyway, we're going to go on to, oops, where am I now? So we're going to close the Q&A session, and we're going to move to a commentary from the panel. So we'll start with each panel member again, and we'll start with Tim.
Thanks, Vince. So once again, we're kind of faced with the challenge here of the city's blanket approach to rezoning downtown for these tall buildings. And we're also just challenged by the typology of a tower and podium, which is the preferred approach to tall buildings in the downtown. And, you know, putting those things together, it just, the site, as I think is being, as you've demonstrated, is it's not quite big enough or not quite the right shape for two towers. So the question is, do you just say, okay, no, forget it, one tower, that's all that fits here? Or do we accept breaking some rules here to achieve a desirable density and hopefully a desirable overall built form? I don't really have an answer to that question, but I think I'm just going to make some suggestions as to how we might get something that's better than what's before us now, and leave it with the city, I think, to deal with some fundamental questions, which is really around transition as much as anything, and separation. So my suggestion is, as I hinted in my questions, I think if you went with two towers with square or very close to square floor plates, that would be better for this site. It would allow you to stagger the towers more. So my thought is that you'd have one of these towers in the northeast corner of the site, not right up against the property lines, but close, and one close to the southwest corner of the site. Mind you, you've got a 12, potentially, hopefully not a 12-story podium next door. We hope it gets pushed down to 6, which would help a lot. But if it's going to be 12, then clearly you're going to have separation from that tower. So another challenge. But 2 square towers would work better. Honestly, my colleagues may not agree with me, but this is where even an exception from 2 towers and just going to 1 tower, an L-shaped tower with no longer facades than 40 meters on either side, but maybe goes to 1,200 square meters or so, that gets you density. It might not get you as much as you've got, but something that's just more sculptural, not straight up 30 stories, but transitions up to 30 stories, would could work on this site as well. Obviously, you'd have to look at it, but if you were, if the city decided really, no, we can't support 2 towers here, you went to 1 tower, I think you'd want to be exploring the different massing approaches than being locked into the 750 square floor plate. It's more work. It might not get you the density you want, but it could work on this particular site. I appreciate the sensitivity you're showing to those existing historic houses, but the city has decided this is the tall building block. So it's unfortunate for the folks living there. There does clearly need to be a step back from those properties of ideally, I would say 6 meters or so for the tower. Could it be less? I'm not sure. But there does need to be step backs from the streets as well, as per the tall building guidelines of 3 meters. A little flexibility, 2.5 maybe, but these are not, John is not a wide street, so you need that. The podium height should come down to the 22 meters. That's going to give you a 1-to-1 ratio, I think, on John, and more of a 80% or a kind of 1 to 1.2 on Wilson. So that's fine. So the podium is too tall. And then finally the treatment on Rebecca is just completely unacceptable. I disagree that I think residential uses are fine on Rebecca. They're fine on every other edge of this block. There's no reason why they can't work there. So I think you need to integrate some 3-story townhouses, laminate those onto your parking structure there and put the driveway at one end of those townhouses, or maybe it's a one sided apartment building. I don't know. I think, but the parking, the back, treating that like a backside is just not the way to go. So that does need a different approach. And so I would leave it there. You just need to do more to respect the tall building guidelines. And I think if that means sacrificing separation distance, I mean, you don't want to get below 20 meters, but to me that trade-off could be worth it if you can meet the other rules. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Jackie, your comments?
Yeah, thank you. One thing we were asked to comment about is the public realm and the outdoor amenity. And with the plans as they are right now, there doesn't seem to be much contribution to the general community for the public realm. And if that's what your pro forma ends up requiring, so be it. But you do have more opportunity on the rooftop to contribute to the outdoor spaces. And looking at 600 units in this community as it is right now. If you think about 1.5 persons per unit, that's 900 people. I just think you're going to need to bring more amenity space. I think it will serve you well in your marketing as well. It can be your marketing hook, views off of the podium to the greater city, over top of the city and the treetops. So I would just recommend you think more about the outdoor spaces that you do have and use them more actively than you're showing right now. Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, we're going to go to James.
Thank you, Vince. I think the focus of my comments is really going to be about sort of the at-grade condition for this building and how it relates to the 3 adjoining streets, and primarily Wilson Street and John Street. Wilson Street right now is, for all intents, a highway. It's a through road. There's very little pedestrian traffic. So this building represents a very real and immediate opportunity to improve the pedestrian streetscape in that area. John Street as well. John Street does have a very good pedestrian environment that, and the north-south views in the city are very important. So on that basis, I think, the emphasis on my comments, and again, appreciating for where you are in the design process, I think you're still very much at early stages. I think I'd like to see a very strong review of how you've designed the podium and how the podium relates to those streets. You seem to be, you're trying to meet the intent of the guidelines, and the one guideline that is met is the 25-meter separation. But as an outcome from that, you have 2, very long buildings, 25 meters apart, and the interface between those 2 is in my opinion, it's not going to be ideal, and it's just not a great urban context. If you're prepared to perhaps bend the guidelines, I think Tim said breaking some rules. Certainly not against that. If the outcome is a better design and a better fit, I think I'd like to see some more work done to maybe try to stagger the buildings, because it may improve views through the site, whether it's on an immediate north-south or on an angle. You can certainly see compatibility with those two remnant pieces that are towards Catherine Street. And I guess as the last comment, if I'm hearing correctly, if there's been a sale on the parcel fronting onto Rebecca Street, there again seems to be a fantastic opportunity. Perhaps it's split ownership between the two projects, but it's a fantastic opportunity for two advanced, sophisticated developers to come up with a collaborative strategy for essentially 95% of an entire city block. So it's a great opportunity, not just to increase density and living space within the downtown, but a really remarkable project. So with that, Vince, those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yuta.
Thank you, Vince. So my comments will be just on two fronts. I agree with my panel members on the massing issues. I think as you go, Gabriel, through the process of studying further where you locate parking, you may look into opportunities to really frame the interface of the parking, or if you end up not having above ground parking, that will be even better. But if you end up having some level of above ground parking to interface with some active residential uses at all fronts. The other suggestion, as Tim already mentioned, maybe to kind of study the potential to introduce a little bit more of a squarish footprint. That will reduce some of your minimum tower separations, but if you stagger them in combination with the tower to the south, it may not be as overwhelming as the more slab kind of type of tower. And finally, when it relates to the podium, I think the fact that basically you have so much density within the site, it has not allowed you to do or introduce meaningful step backs above the podium level. So you end up really with a de facto, in some instances, I believe 12-story podiums, which I know Wilson is quite a large street, but still, defeats the intent of the guidelines for the area. So that's it for me. Hopefully it helps in your future design evolution. Thank you. Back to you, Vince.
Thank you, Yuta. Mario, you some comments, please?
Thanks, Vince. I'll keep it brief. I agree with Tim's comments with regards to the Catherine Street. I think you mentioned Rebecca, but I believe you meant Catherine Street. Wrapping the parking with either residential or retail if it should work. But my bigger concern is just the orientation of the towers being in that east-west direction, coupled with a similar tower configuration on Rebecca Street. It's going to render your outdoor rooftop amenity as in shade for the bulk of the day. So I think that's a really tough condition, and I agree that maybe you can explore, bend the rules, and look at a different orientation if it's more in a north-south direction. You had a sketch up that showed that staggered tower, and I understand that creates an undesirable interface with those two residential properties, but I think there's going to be some give and take, but I think that having some access to sunlight into your amenity space, your main amenity space, is going to be really important. So I would encourage you to consider that, and as well to quality treatment for the pedestrian space at grade. I think you have a pretty good setback on Wilson. I would encourage you to ensure that that stays, because Wilson is kind of a tough pedestrian environment right now. So the more breathing room you can give, I think the better. I think that's it for me, Vince.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Yasin's left the meeting. Is he here? No, he mentioned, he sent an email, said he would forward his comments. I don't know if you got them, Victoria, or not. Did you receive comments from Yasin?
No, I did
No.
not.
Okay, so we'll move on to Robert.
Vince, I can just mention that in our discussions yesterday, in advance of this meeting, Yasin did share many of the views of other that you've heard from other panel members today. So we were pretty much on the same page around the massing concerns.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, Robert.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just open by saying that you know, if you look at the Google Earth image of what's both on this site and in the kind of immediate surrounding area, there's a whole lot of surface parking. So certainly, you know, getting rid of surface parking, which is not a great urban use, and replacing it with you know, with a good urban development is certainly a step in the right direction. And I think there are some good moves here, but I would also say that I agree with all of the comments that have been made so far by the other members of the panel. So I always, in a situation where you end up going last, you say, I'm not going to repeat, I'll try not to repeat, but I think I actually will repeat because I think some of these points are really worth underlining. So, you know, in terms of the site, I do agree. In terms of the present configuration, I think it was Tim who said it, that the site really is too small for two towers as configured. But that's certainly not news that anybody wants to hear. So if the ambition is to try and create a workable plan on this site for two towers, clearly some bending of the rules is going to be necessary. And my take on this would be that if you're going to bend the rules, you bend the rules that affect more the internal workings of the site rather than the more public faces of the site. So again, I would underline and agree with my colleagues on the panel that the offset towers, probably more square in shape than long sort of slab-like form, would be very helpful. You cannot do that, I agree, by having the 25-meter internal separation between towers. But I think if they are shaped more like sort of a square shape, and they're offset in a diagonal, you can, if it's done well, get away with corner-to-corner separation that is less than 25 meters. So that would definitely be something worth looking at and exploring. I also agree with the comment that about the properties in the northeast corner. Again, it's not sort of low-rise residential designation. That I heard the comments about pushing the towers closer to them, but I think again, given the location, given the zoning, I think that's also something that would have to be explored further. In terms of the base building, I agree with my colleagues. The base building really should be. I think the limits that are in the zoning are appropriate, and they should stick to those. And then there should be a minimum 3-meter step back before either going up with the tower or possibly even another sort of second piece of a more low-rise, mid-rise piece. But definitely, in terms of framing the street, you want to stick to the recommendations and the guidelines and what's already in the zoning. So just checking my notes here to see if I missed anything. There's a comment about different heights of towers. I also think that can really help when you've got a block that's going to be redeveloping with many towers. It gets quite visually much less interesting for the city when all the towers are coming in at the same height. Much more interesting if the heights of the towers differ. And then finally, I would also encourage a wrapping of the parking. Right, above ground parking in an urban environment is never, in my opinion, a good urban design move. So if you are going to do above ground parking, I think it's necessary to wrap it with some other kind of use. And that could be wide, shallow units. There are different ways of doing that. And then finally, there was a suggestion to do a block plan to coordinate with all the other owners and developers on the block. And clearly, in a block, it's going to completely redevelop like this. That would be an excellent idea, and I would highly encourage that. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Well, Robert, you did a great job of summarizing all the comments. If you could take the chair, that'd be great.
Sure.
I think we all respect your efforts because it clearly displays great skill in the solution for this property. However, I agree with the comments of the panel. In most cases, the two tower solution is creating a lot of challenges, and I know that if you put in place 2 point blocks there, given the size of a typical point block, it creates some difficulty with the width of the plate in both directions. So I know you're challenged by that. I don't know if you've looked at it. But I think to begin exploring the soils and the water table depth and the issue of contamination is probably something that should be done early in the game rather than at the point where you are now, because if you could have looked at one level below grade parking throughout the site, then it would have changed the scheme immensely without a 4-story above grade garage. And so the other thing I was thinking is, did you consider some low-rise family-oriented units around the edge of the podium so that you do have some 3-bedroom units in the scheme? And I think the setbacks are somewhat critical to the public realm, and that you have to look at the ground plane as has been mentioned. So it's the old story. We max out a site, we take it to the limits, and we try and make it work. And you've done a great job architecturally, I think, but from a planning perspective, an urban open space perspective, it's somewhat limited relative to the public realm. So I think we'll end at that point. And if you have any comments or any clarifications you'd like at this point, we'd be glad to respond to you. If you're confident with what you've heard and you're just simply interested in receiving the written comments, we can finish this meeting now.
I just want to say thank you to the panel. I've written a few notes here, and I really like the comments about bending the rules. I hope you'll tell Mark that you told us to bend the rules, because we'll happily do that to work on this site. We appreciate all the feedback. It was all well received over here. You can't see Ashraf, but he's nodding his head too. So we're very happy to have presented to you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to our panel members who may want to remain on the line, that would be great for a couple of minutes, if possible, Victoria.
Sure. Yep. Yep, that's great. Okay, so I think that's the formal end of the meeting then, and I'll follow up with a written summary in about 3 weeks.
So if the non-panel members could dismiss themselves from the meeting, that'd be great. We'd like to just continue on for a couple of minutes because it's our last meeting, and we'd like to share our thoughts on the number of years we've worked together and how much we've learned from each other and how great it's been.
Yes, and thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you, guys.